Hi there. In today's video I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the topic of interleaving, which is an approach to studying that you might find particularly helpful, especially when you're studying material that is similar or otherwise easily confused. I'll tell you what interleaving is, how it works, and give you some simple advice on how you can use it effectively. In a previous video, we looked at the topic of how you should distribute the time you have available to study, and examine research that indicates that if you have a period of time available to study, it's better to distribute that time across several study sessions than trying to cram all of that time into one marathon study session. This is known as spaced practice. Of course, looking at the issue of how you should distribute the time you have available to study also begs the allied question of how you distribute the subject matter that you have to study. Broadly speaking, there are two options open to you: blocking and interleaving. Let's run through an example to show you how these pan out in practice. Let's say you were studying different examples of stimulant drugs, for example amphetamines, cocaine, caffeine and nicotine. If you were taking the blocking approach to studying, you would conclude your studying of one particular example of drug, let's say amphetamines, covering such subtopics as the chemical composition of the drug, its effect on the nervous system, and its profile of psychological effects, before moving on to the next example of a stimulant drug. Alternatively, you could interleave your study of different types of stimulant drugs by organising your studying around the subtopics that we just mentioned. So you would start off by looking at the different chemical compositions of each example of stimulant drug, before moving on to their respective effects on the nervous system, and concluding your studying by looking at their respective profile of psychological effects. At this point you might be thinking interleaving sounds quite a bit more complicated than blocking, and therefore wonder whether it's worth the effort. In other words, does the research indicate that interleaving has consistent beneficial effects on memory? Well, it's a fairly recent area of research, but the literature is increasingly pointing to consistent beneficial effects of interleaving. For example, a recent systematic literature review by Firth et al. Concluded that interleaving consistently improved memory for concepts, especially in topics that are similar in nature and might otherwise be easily conflated. You may have noticed that there is a degree of overlap between spaced practice and interleaving. Any attempt to use interleaving inherently involves a degree of spaced practice. In contrast, the blocking approach to studying does not, by default, benefit from spaced practice. You might therefore wonder if interleaving has any benefits over and above those that can be accounted for by spacing out your exposure to the material you're studying. Research has addressed this by comparing learning under blocked and interleaved conditions whilst controlling for the effect of spaced practice. It does this by inserting unrelated filler material into the studied material in the blocked condition. And this has the effect of giving the blocked condition the same spaced practice characteristics as the interleaved condition. Under these conditions, the benefits of interleaving remain. Therefore, the positive effects of interleaving on memory cannot simply be attributed to the element of spaced practice that interleaving necessarily entails. So why do we think interleaving works? Well, as we noted in a previous video, memory thrives on thinking. Put very crudely, you tend to remember the things that you invest most effort in thinking about. A foundational part of thinking is using observation and examples to generate further knowledge. Psychologists refer to this as inductive learning, and it essentially involves comparing and contrasting information to generate such things as overarching rules or principles, and to establish things like category membership. Research indicates that interleaving seems to facilitate the process of inductive learning by biasing your attention towards looking for differences between information. This effectively makes comparing and contrasting information, i.e. thinking about that information, that bit easier, which in turn benefits your memory for that information. One important thing to bear in mind about interleaving is that it is not equally effective in all circumstances. As I just pointed out, research suggests that interleaving biases your attention towards looking for differences within information. Therefore, it's hardly surprising that research has indicated that interleaving is most effective when dealing with information that is similar in some way, or that requires effort to distinguish or differentiate. In contrast, blocking seems to focus your attention on similarity within information. So it's more advisable to use blocking when you're dealing with information that is more easily distinguished. Because interleaving works by facilitating the comparison and contrast of information through alternating the presentation of that information, what you want to avoid is undermining this process by, for example, inserting study breaks in between your review of the information that you wish to compare and contrast. Research has indicated that doing this will just interfere with the process and undermine and negate the benefits of interleaving. You should be aware that when you first start using interleaving, it might all seem like a bit more hassle than it's worth, or perhaps even that it's not working especially well for you. Indeed, research has indicated that some people have persisted in the belief that the blocked approach to studying has worked better for them, even though their performance on a subsequent test has been superior when they studied using interleaving. This likely occurs because studying under block conditions is often easier to implement than studying under interleaved conditions. And we often mistakenly assume that ease of use or ease of implementation is synonymous with effective when it comes to learning. In fact, it's the other way around. Research in cognitive psychology has consistently shown that when it comes to learning, a degree of difficulty is desirable, as it trades short-term performance for longer-term learning. Indeed, some research has showed that individuals who used interleaving initially obtained lower scores on practice tests, only to obtain much higher scores in the eventual final exam. So if you're using interleaving in accordance with the advice contained within this video, and it all seems like a bit of a struggle, don't be disheartened. Effective learning is often effortful, but if you persist, your hard work will always pay off. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please do hit the like button. If you're interested in how psychology can help you study more effectively, and you haven't done so already, then why not subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell notification icon so you know when I post new content. Thanks very much.